Hello and welcome. Today, we're going to dive deep into a story about what it really means to wait for restoration, especially during those times when you feel like you've completely hit rock bottom.
Think about a moment when you achieved a huge goal. Maybe you landed that dream job, finished a massive project, or won a championship. You expected to feel nothing but joy, right? But instead, this weird sense of emptiness washes over you. It's often called the post-achievement blues, and it's something a lot of us go through.
Well, it's this very universal human experience that we're going to explore today through the story of one of the Bible's greatest prophets, Elijah. His journey from the highest of highs to the lowest of lows provides this incredible, timeless guide on how to rise again after a fall.
Now, to understand Elijah's collapse, you first have to see him at his absolute peak. On Mount Carmel, he's in this epic spiritual showdown against 850 false prophets, and he wins, big time, by calling down fire from heaven in this incredible miracle that proves God's power. In that moment, he was the hero of Israel.
But that feeling of victory, it was shockingly short-lived. Right after this amazing triumph, Queen Jezebel, a worshiper of false gods, sends him a single message: "By this time tomorrow, you will be dead." The hero who defeated 850 men is suddenly terrified by the threat of one woman. He runs for his life, fleeing a staggering 187 kilometers, basically the entire length of the kingdom, into the wilderness.
All alone in the wilderness, he collapses under a tree, and in complete despair, he prays, "Lord, it is enough. Now take my life." Just moments before, he was running for his life, and now he's asking God to end it. That contradiction just shows you how deep his exhaustion and despair really were.
And if we look at the original Hebrew here, we find something fascinating. The word Elijah uses when he says, "it is enough," is rav. Now, this word means so much more than just sufficient. It's the cry of someone who has reached their absolute limit. He's essentially shouting, "God, it's too much. I'm done. I can't take another step."
So why did this spiritual giant just crumble? It wasn't just fear. Psychologically, he was likely dealing with a massive adrenaline crash after that victory. But spiritually, his disappointment ran even deeper. He expected the miracle on Carmel to lead the whole nation back to God. But that didn't happen. Jezebel's threat felt like proof that his victory was meaningless, that God's work was left unfinished. He was overwhelmed by a sense of failure and crushing isolation.
So how did God respond to this broken man's cry of despair? He didn't scold him. He didn't command him to have more faith. God's intervention was incredibly gentle and practical. Before he dealt with Elijah's soul, he first took care of his body.
It's almost like watching God open up a first aid kit for burnout. First, an angel gently touches him and says simply, without any blame, "Get up and eat." Second, bread baked on hot coals and a jar of water were already prepared for him. And most importantly, after he ate, there was no pressure. He was allowed to just lie down and go back to sleep. This is holistic care, from a God who knows that physical exhaustion is deeply connected to spiritual despair.
And this is where we see God's incredible empathy really shine. A little while later, the angel wakes Elijah again, saying the journey ahead is too much for him. And the Hebrew word used there for too much, it's rav, the exact same word Elijah had cried out in his despair. God wasn't dismissing his feelings. He was validating them, essentially saying, "You're right. This journey is too much for you to handle alone, so I am going to help you."
Strengthened by that special meal, Elijah travels for 40 days and 40 nights until he reaches Horeb, the mountain of God. Now, Mount Horeb is another name for Mount Sinai, the very place where God gave the law to Moses. So this journey isn't just an escape, it's a divinely guided spiritual retreat. The number 40 in the Bible often symbolizes a period of testing and preparation. God was leading Elijah out of his pit of despair and into a place of profound encounter. There, on the mountain of God, Elijah is about to have an experience that will completely change his perspective on God's power and presence. He was probably expecting something huge and dramatic, but the answer he was about to receive was far more intimate and personal.
First, a powerful wind blows, so strong it shatters the rocks on the mountain. A classic, destructive display of divine power. But the Bible is clear, the Lord was not in the wind.
After the wind, an earthquake shakes the ground. Again, another classic sign of a divine appearance, an overwhelming force that can change the landscape in an instant. But again, the Lord was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake, a fire appears. Now for Elijah, fire had to be significant. Fire was the tool of his victory on Mount Carmel. It was his signature miracle.
He must have thought surely God would be in the fire. But for a third time, the scripture declares the Lord was not in the fire.
After all the noise, the chaos, and the spectacle, there came what the original Hebrew describes as a sound of sheer silence, a still, small voice. And in that quiet, intimate moment, Elijah knew God was there. The lesson here is profound. God's true power isn't always in the earthquake and the fire. It's often found in the quiet, gentle, personal whisper.
After this encounter, God addresses the despair that's still in Elijah's heart. But he doesn't just offer words of comfort. God directly answers all of Elijah's fears by giving him a new mission, a new companion, and a totally new perspective.
First, a new mission. God tells him to anoint new kings, showing him that God's plan for justice is still moving forward, even if Elijah won't be the one to finish it. Second, a new companion. He is to anoint Elisha as his successor. This is a direct answer to his intense loneliness. He won't have to finish his ministry alone. And third, he's given a new perspective that will completely upend his worldview.
And this is the final stunning revelation. God tells Elijah, I have reserved 7,000 in Israel, all whose knees have not bowed to Baal. 7,000. Elijah was convinced he was the only faithful person left, but he was completely wrong. His work had not been in vain. There was a whole community of faithful people he just couldn't see. He was never, ever alone.
So what can we take away from Elijah's journey, from complete breakdown to quiet restoration? His story offers a powerful model for us as we navigate our own moments of burnout and despair.
The lessons this story gives us are so clear. First, it's okay to admit you're not okay, that you've reached your limit. God met Elijah not in his strength but in his honesty. Second, restoration is holistic. God took care of his physical needs for food and rest before addressing his spiritual crisis. Third, God's voice, his guidance and comfort, is often heard not in the loud chaos of life, but in the quiet moments when we stop and listen. And finally, you are not as alone as you think, and your efforts are never in vain, even when you can't see the results right away.
And this story leaves each of us with a final question. In all the noise and pressure of your life, what is the still, small voice speaking to you? Maybe, just like it did for Elijah, that voice is speaking of rest and hope and reminding you that you are not alone. Because in the very moment we break down, God is already putting in place the most perfect plan for our restoration.